Propaganda overload. In fascist regimes, propaganda shows up everywhere, on walls, in classrooms, even in cartoons. It buries you in noise until thinking feels like a chore. Flood every billboard, radio, schoolbook, and screen with the same message until it sticks. Truth doesn't matter, only repetition does. Goebbels turned Nazi Germany into a non-stop broadcast. Radios blared about enemies. Books were burned, children sang hate like it was homework. Even cartoons marched to the party line. When the message is everywhere, thinking becomes optional. Today's playbook isn't much different. Russia floods state TV with patriotism and paranoia. China censors apps and scripts the internet. Some regimes even use AI to pump out fake news faster than it can be fact-checked. Propaganda overload doesn't care if it's true, just that you're tired, angry, and too overwhelmed to question anything. So confusion is the point and submission is the goal. Glorifying the past. If we look at fascism, it doesn't look forward, but instead it time travels to a fantasy, a mythic past where the nation was pure, powerful, and unbothered by outsiders. Never mind that it's mostly fiction. If the story makes people nostalgic enough, they'll march for it. In Mussolini's Italy, the dream was to revive the Roman Empire. When Hitler controlled Germany, there was a return to Aryan supremacy. Both involved more statues, more uniforms, and less reality. The past becomes a weapon, proof that the country was better before women voted, minorities had rights, or anyone wore jeans in parliament. These stories work because they sell pride without progress, a golden age that never existed, just old war movies with the ending rewritten, and once people believe the past was stolen from them, they'll follow anyone who promises to steal it back. Attacking intellectuals. Fascist leaders hate facts, unless they come with a loyalty pledge. Academics, scientists, journalists, basically anyone who asks too many questions becomes a target. During Germany's fascist rule, professors were fired for teaching degenerate ideas. Franco's regime purged universities, replacing thinkers with fanboys in suits. It's not about replacing lies with truth, it's about replacing questions with silence. Truth becomes optional, but obedience doesn't. Over time, entire institutions start rotting. History becomes whatever the regime says it was. Biology becomes national pride. Even math gets twisted to serve the message. And once enough experts are silenced or exiled, the rest fall in line. Not because they believe, but because they're tired of looking over their shoulder. It doesn't take a book burning to kill knowledge. Just make people too afraid to open one. Control of education. Way back, people thought school was for learning, but in regimes chasing total control, classrooms become training grounds. Classrooms stop being places to explore ideas, but instead you teach them what to think. In 1930s Germany, math problems included how much it cost to care for disabled people. History lessons skipped facts and focused on bloodlines. Loyalty to the Führer earned more praise than literacy. This tactic still shows up today, rewriting history textbooks, banning certain topics, filtering out entire perspectives. Paint the nation as perfect, the past as glorious, and everyone else as a threat. Children raised this way stop asking questions. They repeat what they're told and call it knowledge. And when every generation forgets what really happened, you don't need to erase the past, it erases itself. Surveillance and informants. Trust doesn't disappear overnight. It gets peeled away, one conversation at a time. First, you lower your voice. Then you stop talking altogether. In regimes built on fear, privacy becomes a myth. In East Germany, the Stasi turned entire neighborhoods into spy networks. Teachers reported students. Children reported their parents. Friendships collapsed under the weight of suspicion. Files were kept on millions, not just enemies, but anyone with a conscience. In recent years, surveillance is digital. Apps track locations, and cameras read faces. Microphones sit in pockets. You don't need secret agents when your phone can do the job. Most of the time, no one has to watch. People just act like someone is. After a while, people stop asking questions. They stop forming opinions. They censor themselves before anyone else has to. Cult of personality. Forget policies and just worship the man in the posters. In fascist regimes, power centers around one figure, wrapped in symbols, praise, and fear. The leader gets treated like a legend, untouchable, all-knowing, and born to rule. During Germany's fascist rise, Hitler's face was stamped on everything from coins to children's books. Mussolini filled Italian streets with statues of himself. It wasn't really about politics, it was branding, built around a leader who saw himself as a savior. The trick is simple: make the leader the answer to every problem. The economy? He's fixing it. A disaster? He's saving you. Critics? Clearly traitors. Dissent stops being disagreement and starts sounding like blasphemy. The leader takes center stage, and suddenly, loyalty comes with rules, rituals, and no room to say no. Weaponizing religion. When politics needs backup, some regimes call the church. Fascist movements often fuse national identity with religious purity. It's not just God bless our country, it's God only blesses us. In Franco's Spain, Catholicism got turned into a tool for measuring who belonged and who didn't. Priests preached nationalism. School books taught obedience to God and the state in the same breath. The regime treated any disagreement like spiritual betrayal, not just a political one. You didn't just get arrested, but you got excommunicated and thrown in jail. This tactic works because it puts divine weight behind every policy. Oppose the regime, and then you're not just wrong, but you're ungodly. Media suppression. Fascist regimes hate free press the way cats hate baths. Independent media means independent thought, and that's a problem when your whole system runs on control. When the Nazis were in charge, newspapers were shut down or taken over. Radio stations played government-approved messages 24/7. Journalists who asked the wrong questions disappeared, or worse. The truth wasn't reported. Instead, it was assigned. Even now, some governments still copy the playbook. Journalists get jailed, newsrooms raided, or licenses pulled for bias. Others go subtle, like buying up outlets and filling them with loyal voices who smile while lying. Control the news and you control the narrative. And once people only hear one version of the truth, they start mistaking it for the only one. Because when every headline comes from the same voice, it's not news anymore. It's a loudspeaker with better graphics. Corrupting elections. Some leaders love elections because they already know they'll win. Elections still happen, but the outcome's already decided before the first vote is cast. Hitler held a vote in 1934 to take total control. The ballots were counted, but the choice wasn't real. Vote yes or face the consequences. Other regimes block rival parties, ban candidates, or make voting so unfair that it's just a fancy way to say yes to the boss. Even in modern times, some governments pretend to play fair while quietly changing the rules. They move polling places, throw out ballots, or spread fake news to confuse people. Public opinion gets staged like a play, just convincing enough to look like a choice. Because when elections become theater, the winner is already backstage. Enemy creation. Fascist regimes love shortcuts, and the easiest one is picking a punching bag. Blame a group, label them dangerous, then crank up the fear until the crowd starts cheering. Inside Hitler's regime, Jews were cast as villains in every speech and headline. Not long after, that lie turned into camps, gas chambers, and 6 million dead. Proof that words don't stay words for long. Myanmar did the same to the Rohingya, called them terrorists, burned their homes, then pretended it was national security. It was really a cleanup job disguised as patriotism. It's cheap, it's cruel, and it works. Invent an enemy, and people stop asking hard questions. They just follow the noise. Because nothing unites a frightened crowd like someone to fear more than their own government. Controlling art and culture. Fascist regimes don't just ban books, they ban feelings. Music, movies, paintings, anything that makes people think too much gets a warning label or a torch. At the peak of Nazi power, art that was made by Jewish or modernist creators was called degenerate and pulled from museums. In Italy, films had to praise the nation or they didn't get made. Even jazz was seen as suspicious, and apparently saxophones were too free. These days, some governments still control what people can watch, read, or listen to. Artists get censored, writers vanish from shelves. The real aim goes deeper than censorship. It shuts down the ability to think beyond the rules. Forced national unity. In some regimes, being different isn't allowed. Speak another language, practice another religion, or fly the wrong flag, and then suddenly you're not a citizen, you're a problem. Mussolini tried to erase local dialects and made everyone speak proper Italian. Franco banned the Catalan language in Spain. Even talking like your grandparents could get you a visit from the police. The goal is to crush identity. No more regions, tribes, or traditions. Just one way to talk, one way to live, and one giant national costume party you can't leave. It's not unity, instead it's erasure dressed like teamwork. And when everyone's forced to act the same, the only thing that really grows is silence. Gender policing. In fascist systems, there's one way to be a man, one way to be a woman, and no room for anything else. Men are told to be tough, fight wars, and run the country. And the women are to stay home, raise babies, and smile through it. Under Hitler's rule, women got medals for having kids, like motherhood was an Olympic sport. In Mussolini's Italy, jobs were taken from women so men could lead the nation. Anyone who stepped outside those roles was seen as weak, dangerous, or unfit. In some countries right now, leaders act like gender roles are national security. They blame feminism, LGBTQ people, or anyone who doesn't act right for ruining tradition. Tradition gets used like a shield, hiding a system built to control people's lives. Because when people can't be themselves, they're easier to manage and easier to punish. Economic coercion. Some regimes punish people by taking away their money instead of locking them up. Speak out and suddenly your job's gone and your land's gone. Even your grocery list gets shorter. Back in the day, Jewish business owners had their shops taken and handed to party loyalists. Franco's government cut off work and housing from families seen as disloyal. Basically, obedience opened doors, and skill didn't matter if you weren't on the right side. In some places, this still goes on. Critics lose contracts, and activists get blacklisted. If the state doesn't like you, it makes sure the bank doesn't either. It stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like a choice between food and honesty. And when your next meal depends on silence, it's no wonder so many people bite their tongues. Normalization of violence. When violence becomes routine, people stop flinching. That's the goal. In fascist systems, street fights, beatings, and raids happen in daylight, calculated and public, meant to keep everyone in line. In Mussolini's Italy, black shirts roamed the streets, attacking political enemies in broad daylight. Nazi thugs smashed windows and dragged people out of their homes, and nobody stopped it. State-backed squads carried it out in the open, dressed for the job and protected from consequence. Over time, the public gets used to it. A protester goes missing? Must have done something wrong. A neighbor gets beaten? Don't ask questions. When fear becomes normal, justice becomes optional. In modern times, paramilitary groups, riot squads, and unofficial enforcers play the same role. They're loud, brutal, and always seem to show up 5 minutes before someone gets a concussion. Conspiracy thinking. Fascist leaders turn lying into architecture, layering fear, fiction, and blame until paranoia feels like common sense. Every problem is part of a plot. If the economy crashes, it was sabotage. If there's unrest, it was planned by enemies. Even small issues get blamed on a hidden hand. A lot of fake stories about Jewish conspiracies were printed like facts. Mussolini blamed communists for everything. If the pasta was overcooked, it was probably sabotage. The pattern is clear. Only the leader tells the truth, and everyone else is out to get you. These theories flood the mind until thinking feels like a chore. When people don't know what's real, they look for someone who sounds sure. And once they do, that voice becomes the only one that matters. Manipulating language. In fascist systems, language gets turned into a tool. It hides the bad, blames the wrong people, and makes lies sound safe. Freedom means loyalty. Peace means obedience. Enemies aren't jailed, they're relocated. The point isn't to explain things better, it's to confuse people just enough that wrong starts sounding right. Their labor camps were called re-education centers. Hitler's slogan, "Work makes you free," was nailed to the gates of Auschwitz. In Italy, censorship was called protection. It's like running a scam with a dictionary. Change the words and you change how people think. Arresting protesters becomes restoring order. Silencing the press becomes cleaning up misinformation. The more the language gets polished, the harder it is to see the damage underneath. And once the public speaks in slogans instead of ideas, the truth becomes a foreign language. Perpetual crisis mode. Some regimes survive by keeping everyone on edge. One day it's a protest, the next day it's outsiders at the gates. The emergency changes, but the fear stays the same. After the Reichstag fire in 1933, Hitler blamed enemies of the state and grabbed full control. Mussolini said the country was falling apart and promised to save it by crushing anyone who got in his way. More recently, in Turkey, a failed coup attempt in 2016 led to mass arrests, media shutdowns, and sweeping powers for the president. The crisis became the excuse, and the fear never really ended. This trick still works. Leaders say it's not safe, then pass new laws or silence critics. They act like the country's one bad day away from turning into a movie trailer. After a while, people stop asking if the danger is real. They just want someone to fix it. Redefining loyalty. Fascist politics leaves no room for choice. Loyalty is expected from the start, but it's not about loving your country, it's about loving the leader. The flag doesn't matter unless his face is printed on it. Hitler made loyalty personal. Swearing an oath to Germany wasn't enough. You had to swear it to him. Mussolini did the same. Obeying the state meant obeying him. Questioning orders meant betrayal. Even silence looks suspicious. This turns the whole country into a loyalty test. Neighbors rat each other out. Co-workers disappear for saying the wrong thing. People clap at speeches like their lives depend on it, because sometimes they actually do. What looks like unity is just fear doing its job in silence. And when fear decides who claps the loudest, everyone ends up clapping just to survive. Destroying independent institutions. Fascist regimes don't like referees, courts, watchdog groups, and election boards. All those systems that are supposed to keep power in check get silenced, stacked, or smashed. Hitler replaced judges with loyal party men. Mussolini turned Italy's legal system into a rubber stamp. If an institution couldn't be controlled, it got gutted. Laws still existed, but only to protect the regime. This tactic isn't flashy, but it works. A corrupt court doesn't need riot gear. Instead, it just needs a pen. And once every system bends to the leader's will, the whole country plays by one rule. Whatever the boss says goes. People still think they have rights until they try to use them. Targeting youth. Fascist regimes don't wait for kids to grow up, they shape them early. Schools turn into training grounds. Clubs, camps, and youth groups teach obedience before kids learn long division. During the Nazi era, boys joined the Hitler Youth. Girls trained for motherhood. Mussolini's regime had schoolbooks filled with slogans and soldiers. Math problems came with marching orders. Fun was allowed, as long as it ended with a salute. Kids marched, chanted, and learned who to love and who to fear. And parents who didn't like it? Then too bad. The state wanted their children more than their opinions. A generation raised on propaganda doesn't need convincing. They grow up believing control is normal and that freedom is something suspicious.